Thanksgiving is supposed to be about family, about warmth, tradition, togetherness. At least, that's what I used to believe. That's what I tried to believe every single year. Even when my mom's passive-aggressive jabs stung more than the dry stuffing she insisted on making, or when my brother Scott treated my kids like they were second-tier extras in the big production of his perfect little family. My name's Brad. I'm 39, divorced, father of two incredible kids, Sophie, 10, and Max, 7. I've had full custody for the last 3 years. Their mom decided motherhood wasn't quite her thing after the divorce, which, I'll be honest, devastated me at the time. But now I consider it the best thing that could have happened to us. My kids and I, we're a tight unit. Friday night movie marathons, Sunday pancakes, building forts in the living room. We've got our rhythm. And every year, like clockwork, we'd pack up the mashed sweet potatoes I made from scratch, brown sugar, marshmallows, the works, and drive over to my parents' house for Thanksgiving. It wasn't always easy. My mom, Helen, is, well, let's just say she likes things a certain way. She's the type of person who says, "Oh, you're wearing that," with a smile that makes your skin crawl. And Scott, my younger brother, golden child, married young to his high school sweetheart, corporate job, lives 20 minutes away from our parents, coaches his son's soccer team. The works. He could show up late with a store-bought pie and get a standing ovation. Meanwhile, I once brought homemade cranberry relish and she asked if I got the recipe from a cartoon. Still, I played along. For the kids. For tradition. I didn't want to be the reason they missed out on the big family holiday with cousins and grandparents and loud conversations over turkey, even when I felt like we were just background characters. This year started differently. It was Thanksgiving morning. The kids were still in their pajamas, watching the Macy's parade and arguing over whether a giant Pikachu balloon was cooler than SpongeBob. I was in the kitchen, finishing up the sweet potatoes. The apartment smelled like cinnamon and roasted pecans, and I had the green bean casserole waiting to go in the oven. It was peaceful. For a moment, it actually felt like the kind of Thanksgiving I used to daydream about when I was younger. Then my phone rang. It was my mom. I wiped my hands on a towel and picked up. "Hey, Mom. Happy Thanksgiving." "Hi, honey," she said. Her voice was unusually clipped, like she was trying to sound pleasant but couldn't quite commit. "Listen, Scott's bringing Angela's family this year. Her parents, her sister, her sister's fiancé, and I think the twins." "Oh, that's a lot," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Well, yes it is. And, the house is only so big. We're going to be tight on seating, and I don't want the kids feeling cramped or overwhelmed." "Okay," I said slowly, already sensing where this was going. "So maybe, just this once, you could drop off a plate? Grab some food and take it back home? I'm sure the kids won't mind, and we'll be sure to pack up extra dessert for them." I didn't say anything for a few seconds. I think I was waiting for her to laugh and say she was joking, that it was some ridiculous misunderstanding. But she didn't. She just waited. "Right," I finally said. "Okay. Yeah, sure. Oh, thank you, Brad. You're so understanding. And I promise we'll do a proper dinner with just us next weekend. Maybe even get Chinese food, like we used to." I hung up. I didn't say goodbye. Just ended the call, walked into the living room, and sat on the couch between Sophie and Max. They looked up at me with hopeful little smiles, thinking it was almost time to get dressed and head to Grandma and Grandpa's. I looked at them and said, as gently as I could, "Guys, change of plans. Thanksgiving dinner's canceled." Sophie's brow furrowed. "Why?" I gave them the sanitized version. "Grandma's house is too full this year, so we're just doing dinner here instead." Max blinked. "But I made a turkey hat at school. You said I could show Grandpa." "I know, Bud," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I know. We ate the sweet potatoes on paper plates in front of a movie. I tried to make it fun. Joked about how we got the whole feast to ourselves. But the truth is, I was simmering. Boiling. The more I thought about it, the more it burned. It wasn't even about the food or the seating or the sudden change of plans. It was the years leading up to this. The dozens of little slights. The way my mom would brag about Scott's promotion, but forget I even had a job. The way she always gave his kids presents with their names engraved on them and handed mine gift cards to share. The way Scott called my kids a handful, like they were stray dogs I hadn't trained properly. And now, they had a full Thanksgiving dinner. Without us. At 4:06 p.m., my phone buzzed. A photo. from my cousin Melissa, who I hadn't seen in over a year. It was a shot of the dining room table. My mom's fine china, gold-rimmed glasses, a giant turkey in the middle, candles lit, everyone smiling. And right there, front and center, was my sweet potato dish, scooped clean on one side, the marshmallows perfectly toasted on top. My heart dropped. Then it hardened. I stood up. I didn't say anything. I just grabbed Sophie's coat, slid Max's shoes on, and told them, "We're going for a drive." I didn't knock. I walked in. My mom's voice came from the kitchen, cheerful and oblivious. "Oh, someone must have left the back door." Then silence. The whole room turned. I looked around at all of them. My brother, his wife, her family, my parents. Then I gently took Sophie's hand, walked her over to the kids' table, and helped her into a chair. Max climbed up beside her. That's when my dad stood up. Slowly. The way someone does when they're trying to decide if they're about to de-escalate a situation or double down. And what he said next made the entire room go dead silent. He looked at me, jaw clenched. Then he said, loud, clear, in front of everyone, "You weren't invited, Brad." Just like that. No pretense. No polite cover-up. No awkward apology or attempt to smooth things over. Just those 4 words, said like I was a stranger who'd wandered in off the street. I think that was the first time I truly felt it. Not just the rejection, not just the exclusion, but the decision that someone, maybe both of them, had made a choice to erase me from the picture. And they didn't even have the decency to be subtle about it anymore. The room was frozen, forks halfway to mouths. Angela's family looking everywhere, but at me. My mom stood by the sink, clutching a pie server like it was going to save her from the tension filling the air. My brother, of course, didn't say a word. He just sipped his wine. I didn't move. I didn't yell. I just looked at my dad and said, calmly, "You invited my dish, not me." Sophie glanced over, confused. "Daddy, why did Grandpa say that?" I crouched beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "He's just surprised to see us, honey. That's all." She nodded, unsure. Max was already chewing a roll, blissfully unaware. And I was glad. At least one of us could enjoy the food without choking on the awkwardness. I stood back up and looked around the table. The candles flickered. The chandelier buzzed faintly. No one spoke. "Well," I said, clapping my hands once, "since we're here, might as well eat, right?" My dad didn't stop me. Neither did my mom. In fact, she turned her back and started busying herself with the dishes, pretending like her cheeks weren't flushed red. I fixed myself a small plate, not because I wanted the food anymore, but because I needed to make a point. I needed them to see me. And I sat down, at the adult table, in an empty chair at the end. No one said a word. It was the longest 20 minutes of my life. The conversation limped along after that. My mom asked Angela's mom about their new kitchen remodel. Scott started a story about their trip to Vermont, which somehow involved a private chef and a hot air balloon ride. I just sat there, chewing my turkey, making sure my kids were okay. But the tension? It never left. And I didn't either. When we finally left, I told my kids to say thank you. Sophie hugged my mom like she always did, but this time she whispered something that made my mom's eyes narrow. I didn't ask what. I didn't need to. We got in the car, and I drove in silence for a few blocks. Then Sophie asked, "Are we in trouble?" I glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "No, baby. Why would you think that?" "Because Grandma looked mad. And Grandpa was mean." I swallowed hard. "No one's in trouble. They're just not very good at sharing." Sophie nodded slowly, then stared out the window. Max had already dozed off. When we got home, I tucked them in, kissed their foreheads, and sat on the couch with the lights off. I must have stared at the wall for a full hour, turning it all over in my head. The truth was, this wasn't new. Not really. When we were kids, Scott could do no wrong. He was younger by 3 years, but you'd never know it from how our parents treated him. Every bad grade I brought home. What happened, Brad? Every bad grade Scott brought home. He must have had a tough teacher. When I got into a good college on scholarship, my dad barely blinked. When Scott went to community college for a semester and dropped out, they framed his class schedule like it was a diploma. I chalked it up to being the older sibling, the responsible one. I told myself that being overlooked meant I was doing something right, that they didn't need to worry about me because I had it together. But deep down, I knew better. I felt it. And when my wife left, when she walked out and left me with 2 kids and no warning, my parents' sympathy lasted all of 2 weeks. After that, it was back to business as usual. You sure you're not doing something to push women away? My dad asked once, while handing me a beer. Some men just aren't cut out for marriage, Mom said, dabbing her mouth at brunch, like she wasn't dismantling my life over Eggs Benedict. They never said anything like that to Scott when he and Angela had their third screaming match in public. Never when they took a break for 6 months and Angela moved back in with her parents. And the favoritism wasn't just emotional. It was practical. When Scott needed a new car, they co-signed the loan. When I needed a little help covering Max's surgery bill 2 years ago, we're on a fixed income, Brad. Things are tight. When Scott's second kid was born, my mom bought them a stroller that cost more than my first apartment's rent. When I mentioned Sophie had outgrown her shoes, maybe you should get a side hustle. So why did I keep showing up? Because of the kids. Because despite all the slights and subtle digs, I still wanted them to feel like they had a family. I didn't want my issues with my parents to become their issues with their grandparents. But now my daughter had to watch her grandfather stand up at Thanksgiving and tell her dad he wasn't invited. Now she had to wonder if she wasn't welcome, too. That night, I opened an old notebook from my kitchen drawer, the one I used to jot down grocery lists and to-dos. And I started writing. A timeline. Not for revenge. Not yet. But just to see it. To have it laid out. Every slight. Every little dig. Every time they chose Scott over me. Every time they handed him a life raft while I was sinking. And somewhere along the way, as I filled page after page, something shifted. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was done. A few days passed. No one called. No one texted. Not to apologize. Not to check in. Not even to ask if the kids wanted leftover pie. Then, Sunday evening, Scott posted a photo on Facebook. One of those cheesy family collages. Thanksgiving blessings. My dish was in 3 of the photos. Front and center. And not a single mention of me or the kids. That was the first real crack. The second came the next weekend. My mom called. Brad, honey. So, are we still on for Chinese tonight? I stared at the phone. She sounded chipper. Completely oblivious. Like the previous Thursday hadn't happened. Like she hadn't told me to just drop off a plate, like we were a catering service. I don't think that's going to work for us, I said calmly. There was a pause. Oh, why not? Things feel a little off right now. I think we need some space. She clicked her tongue. Bradley, don't be dramatic. I almost laughed. Almost. Tell you what, I said. You can have dinner with Sophie and Max next weekend. Just you and them. No one else. Well, I don't know if that's really fair. Then we'll pass, I said, and hung up. That was the first time I'd ever drawn a line. But it wouldn't be the last. The following week, Sophie came home from school with a handmade holiday card. A tree, glitter, to Grandma and Grandpa scrawled in big red crayon. I asked if she wanted to mail it. She shook her head. I think I'll just give it to Grandpa at Christmas. And something in me went cold. Because I realized they expected to see us. Like nothing had happened. Like they could erase me from a holiday and still unwrap presents with my children a month later, no questions asked. That's when I knew. They weren't going to change. But I could. I started making plans. Quietly. Thoughtfully. I wasn't just going to withdraw. I was going to reframe the whole dynamic. Not with yelling. Not with revenge. Not yet. But with something far more disruptive. Control. And on the surface, everything stayed the same. Until one quiet afternoon. I got a letter in the mail. It was addressed to me, but the name on the return label wasn't my parents'. It was Angela's. Inside was a simple card. And a message that turned everything upside down. Brad, I think you deserve to know the truth. I'm sorry it took me this long. But it wasn't your mom who wanted you to skip Thanksgiving. It was Scott, he said. And that's where I stopped reading. Because I didn't need to see the rest to know what came next. Scott had orchestrated the whole thing. And this time, I wasn't going to let it slide. Not for peace. Not for the kids. And definitely not for him. It's funny how a few lines of text can rewire your entire understanding of the past. After reading Angela's note, I sat at the kitchen table for what felt like hours. The card was still open in front of me, but I wasn't even looking at it anymore. My eyes were fixed on the wall. My thoughts were somewhere else entirely, spooling backward through every interaction I'd had with my brother over the last year. No, the last decade. At first, I wanted to deny it. Maybe she misunderstood. Maybe Scott said something that was taken out of context. But the more I thought about it, the more everything started to click, like puzzle pieces falling into place. The sideways glances. The smug tone in his voice. The way he always showed up just as I was gaining ground with our parents. only to recenter everything around him again. Scott didn't just want to be the favorite. He wanted to be the only one left standing. And I'd handed him that power year after year. But not anymore. The truth is, that letter didn't break me. It freed me. Because once I knew where the rot started, I could finally start cleaning house. Still, the weeks that followed were harder than I expected. Christmas came and went. We didn't go. I didn't even send a text. There were a few passive-aggressive voicemails from my mom, laced with her signature faux sweetness. Hope you're enjoying your little break, Brad. The kids missed out on seeing their cousins open presents together. Such a shame. Maybe next year. We'll plan ahead so there's room for everyone. Just a thought. But I didn't bite. I stayed quiet. Instead, I poured my energy into Sophie and Max. We baked cookies, built the world's most lopsided gingerbread house, and stayed up until midnight watching movies on New Year's Eve with sparkling cider and popcorn. And something shifted during that time, not just between me and the kids, but inside me. I stopped trying to prove anything. To them, to my parents, even to myself. I'd spent so much of my adult life playing the good son game, showing up, swallowing disrespect, hoping that if I was patient enough, kind enough, successful enough, they'd finally see me. But now I didn't care if they saw me or not, because I saw myself, and I liked the man looking back. I started going to the gym. Nothing crazy, just a few times a week, early in the morning before the kids were up. I needed a routine, something mine. A place to let out the frustration that had been coiled inside me for years. The anger, the shame, the disappointment. At first, I could barely do 10 push-ups without shaking. My back ached, my legs cramped, and I cursed every treadmill in existence. But something about the soreness was satisfying, like I was dragging the weight of my past out of my body, one rep at a time. I also started freelancing again. I used to do web design back in college. Nothing fancy, but I was good at it. Clean layouts, good typography, an eye for detail. After the divorce, I put it aside, too exhausted from parenting full-time and working my desk job to build anything of my own. But now, with the kids in school and my evenings quiet, I had time. I built a portfolio site, reached out to a few old contacts, took on small jobs at first, fixing broken layouts, updating logos, polishing SEO. One client became two became 5, and by spring, I had enough regular clients to cut my hours at the office in half. The money wasn't life-changing yet, but it was mine. And more importantly, I was building something that no one could take from me. Around that time, Sophie asked if she could invite a friend over for a sleepover. Her first. I said yes. I watched her buzz around the apartment, making checklists, cleaning her room, setting out popcorn bowls and extra blankets. She was so excited, so proud. And I thought this is the life I want. Not whatever performance my family was still putting on without us. Not Scott's curated Instagram family with matching flannel pajamas and hand-carved turkeys. Not my mom's holiday dinners where love was rationed like champagne and doled out only to the highest bidder. This, messy, honest, earned. Then, one day in early March, I got a phone call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. When I listened later, it was Angela. Hey, Brad. I know this is weird, but I need to talk to you. It's not about Scott, I swear. It's about something else. I promise I'm not being dramatic. Can we talk? Please. I didn't respond at first. I didn't know her anything. But the tone in her voice, it wasn't dramatic. It was worried. Like something had shifted for her, too. A week later, she called again. Brad. Look, I know you don't trust me. I wouldn't either. But I have kids, too. And you should know what's going on. I'll meet you anywhere. Just name it. So I agreed. We met at a coffee shop halfway between our houses. I got there early and sat at the corner table with my back to the wall, watching people come and go. Angela arrived 5 minutes late, wearing oversized sunglasses and clutching a coat, even though it was nearly 70 degrees outside. She sat down without saying anything, just looked at me for a long moment, like she wasn't sure if she should speak. Then she said, quietly, "He's been telling them you're unstable." I blinked. What? My parents? His coworkers? Even your parents? That you're emotionally volatile? That you've been struggling since the divorce? That you've had episodes? I stared at her, stunned. I asked him about it, she continued. He said he was just trying to prepare people in case you showed up somewhere and caused a scene. My jaw tightened. You mean like Thanksgiving? She nodded. I felt something hot and sour rise in my throat. rage, shame, betrayal. But I forced it down. Why are you telling me this? Because I think he's starting to believe it himself, she said. And because I'm tired of playing along. She slid something across the table. A USB drive. What's this? Backups, she said. Texts, emails, voicemails, stuff I shouldn't have saved, but did. I figured if he ever turned on me, I'd need proof. But now, I think you need it more. I didn't take it right away. I just stared at it. Like touching it would somehow make everything more real. You're not the problem, Brad, she said, voice trembling. He is. He's always been. When I finally got home, I plugged the drive into my laptop. And what I saw made my skin crawl. Texts between Scott and my mom. Conversations where they openly mocked my parenting. Suggested I was too sensitive to be trusted with family matters. Where Scott accused me of turning Sophie into a weapon. Where my mom agreed. Emails between Scott and my father, with subject lines like Brad's latest tantrum and Thanksgiving crisis averted. Voice memos from Scott venting to Angela, casually admitting he was managing the family dynamic so I didn't ruin things again. That night, after the kids were asleep, I poured a drink and sat on the balcony, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. And I made a decision. I wasn't going to burn it all down. I was going to build something better. I'd let them keep their broken little kingdom, their shallow hierarchy, their curated smiles and performative family photos. I didn't want back in. I wanted out on my own terms. So I started writing again, not just to document the timeline, but to own it. I wrote everything down, every slight, every betrayal, every voice memo, every email. I organized it into a journal, not for revenge, not for leverage, but for clarity. And over time, the story stopped being about them. It started being about me. A single dad who raised 2 kids in a 2-bedroom apartment with hand-me-down furniture and discount groceries, and more love than that entire house full of invited guests could ever contain. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. I didn't know what came next. I didn't have a master plan. Not yet. But I knew this much. The man they tried to erase? He was just getting started. I didn't move fast. That was the trick. Revenge, real revenge, the kind that lasts, isn't loud or messy. It's quiet, patient. It waits behind the curtain while everyone else thinks the show is still going on, blissfully unaware that the whole stage is about to collapse. After that night on the balcony, I stopped trying to prove myself to my family altogether. No more hoping for invites. No more checking in on birthdays. I unfollowed my parents and Scott on Facebook. Muted the group text where they shared updates about family events I hadn't been invited to in years. It was like slowly fading out of a room you were never really welcome in to begin with. But I didn't disappear. I watched. I watched the way my parents kept pretending nothing had happened. The way they posted photos of Scott and Angela's kids holding handmade cards labeled Best Grandma Ever and World's Greatest Grandpa. I watched how they tagged themselves at school plays and soccer games and completely skipped Sophie's science fair project, even though she'd won second place in the entire district. I never told her they'd been invited. She never asked. Angela stayed quiet, too, but we began texting every couple of weeks. Just small things at first, checking in, sharing a story about the kids, a joke, a meme. Then, gradually, she opened up more. About Scott. About the pressure. About how their marriage was more for appearances than affection. About how she sometimes felt like she was living in a staged photo album. One night, she called and said, "You know, it's weird, but since Thanksgiving, you're the only one who's ever actually listened to me." I wasn't sure how to respond to that, so I didn't. Not right away. Instead, I focused on what I could control. My freelance business was growing. I picked up a few bigger clients, started outsourcing small design tasks, and officially registered my LLC. I turned my bedroom closet into a makeshift recording booth, bought a decent mic, and started narrating online courses about UI/UX design. To my surprise, they started selling. I wasn't getting rich, but the money was good, solid, independent. One afternoon, Sophie and Max were watching a movie while I cleaned out the storage boxes in the hallway closet. That's when I found it. An old accordion folder I hadn't touched in years. Inside, lease agreements, court documents, custody papers, and something I hadn't thought about in a long time. The deed to the lake house. It wasn't much. A modest 3-bedroom place near Lake Minnewaska that my grandparents left to me in their will. Not my parents. Not Scott. Just me. I'd only been there a few times since the divorce, usually with the kids in summer, but I always paid the property taxes on time, kept up the maintenance, and made sure it stayed in good condition. But what caught my eye that day was something else, a photo. It was taken the year my grandparents passed. Me, standing on the dock with Sophie in my arms and Max clutching my leg. Behind us, the cabin, the trees, the lake shimmering in the background. My mom had refused to come that year, said it was too far. Scott had claimed he was busy with work, so it was just me and the kids. And my grandparents. It hit me like a jolt. That house, it wasn't just property. It was proof. A legacy passed down to me because they saw me, because they trusted me, something my parents never did. And suddenly, I saw the path, the setup. The next time Angela called, I asked her a question. Do your parents still think I'm unstable? She hesitated. They haven't said anything in a while, but yeah, I think they're still a little wary. Because of what Scott told them. She didn't respond. That was confirmation enough. I nodded to myself, then said, would you be willing to help me fix that? She exhaled. I've been waiting for you to ask. We started slow. I told her I wanted to clear the air, not out of bitterness, but to set the record straight for the kids. Angela agreed to invite her parents to the lake house for a spring barbecue, just a casual get-together. I told her I'd bring the kids, handle the food, and play it friendly. No drama. It worked. Her parents showed up stiff, wary, polite to the point of robotic. But I killed them with kindness. Pulled out the grill. Let Max show off his soccer tricks. Let Sophie explain her science fair win. I offered her dad a beer, complimented her mom's earrings. When the sun started to dip, I handed them a copy of the deed to the lake house. Just wanted you to know, I said gently. This place is mine. Was gifted to me by my grandparents. Not sure what Scott's told you, but this is home for me and my kids when we need it. You're welcome here anytime. They looked stunned. Angela's mom said something about how grateful she was to see us all smiling again. Her dad just gave me a nod, the kind men give when they realize they might have misjudged someone. After they left, Angela lingered. That was impressive, she said. You'd be surprised what people believe when they don't see the whole picture. She gave me a look. And what are you planning to do with that picture? I smiled. Frame it. Over the next month, I reached out to a few more people. Quietly. Scott had spread a lot of stories over the years. Neighbors, extended family, old friends. I started meeting them one by one. Not to argue. Not to prove anything. Just to show up. A quick coffee. An invitation to the kids' birthday parties. A link to my online portfolio. Proof that I was working. Thriving. Normal. Angela helped, too. Subtly. She'd mentioned that I'd been doing really well lately, or that Brad's business seems to be taking off. It wasn't flattery. It was recalibration. And people started to notice. The tide didn't turn overnight. But slowly, like a river cutting through stone, the narrative began to erode. I didn't bring up Scott. I didn't need to. Instead, I focused on what mattered, my name, my reputation, my truth. Then, in mid-April, I got a text from my mom. Hey, Brad. Can we talk? It was the first time she'd reached out directly since Thanksgiving. I didn't answer right away. The next day, she sent another. Saw Angela's parents last weekend. They mentioned how lovely the lake house looked. Didn't realize you'd been hosting guests. Translation, we didn't realize you had assets worth noticing. That's when I knew the setup was working. They were paying attention now, but they still didn't know why. A week later, Sophie came home from school and said, Grandma asked if I could come over this weekend. Just me. I looked up from my laptop. Did she say why? Nope. Just said she missed me. I smiled gently. And what do you want? Sophie shrugged. I kind of want to stay here. We're making lasagna, remember? So we made lasagna. And I let that silence say everything I needed it to. But I wasn't done yet. I started compiling everything. Documents, emails, texts, property deeds, freelance earnings, even screenshots of client reviews. I organized it into a binder. Not because I needed to use it right away, but because I wanted to be ready. Then I made one more move. I emailed my parents an invitation. Family cookout at the lake house, Memorial Day weekend. I didn't expect them to come. I didn't want them to, but I needed them to see it. That there was a gathering happening without them. That the orbit had shifted. Angela RSVP'd yes. So did her parents. And when I posted a few photos on social media, Sophie helping me on the grill, Max splashing in the lake, Angela and her dad setting up lawn chairs, I tagged nobody. But I made the album public. By Monday morning, the message was clear. I wasn't the forgotten son anymore. I was the man who could gather people, host them, provide for them, make them feel at home, without needing anyone's permission. And for the first time in my life, my parents were on the outside looking in. I could feel the pressure building, the whispers, the uncertainty. They'd underestimated me for so long they didn't even see the foundation I'd laid. But it was there now, solid, steady, and beneath it, a fuse, waiting to be lit. It happened over a lukewarm cup of decaf. Not the revenge itself, that came later. But the moment I knew it was inevitable. I was sitting across from my mother in a booth at her favorite brunch spot. The same place we used to go when Scott was away at college, and she'd treat me to half an Eggs Benedict and a monologue about how he was destined for something big. Now, she stirred her coffee and gave me a look that tried, and failed, to seem maternal. "You've been quiet lately," she said, not meeting my eyes. I nodded. "Yeah. And all these photos with Angela and the kids. I can't help but feel like you're trying to prove something." I laughed just once. Not loud. Just enough to make her flinch. "I'm not proving anything, Mom. I'm just living my life." She paused. "Are you seeing her? Angela?" She nodded. I sipped my coffee. "Would it matter?" She blinked. "Well, it would be inappropriate. She's your brother's wife," I finished. "Estranged wife. Who he lies to. Gaslights. Controls." She set her spoon down too hard. "That's a serious accusation." "No, Mom. You knowing all of this and choosing to look away for years, that's a serious accusation." The silence between us was heavy. She fiddled with her napkin. "I think you're being cruel." "No," I said, standing up and tossing a 20 on the table. "I think you're just not used to me not needing you anymore." That was the last time we had a meal together. Because by then, the setup was complete, and it was time to flip the switch. I didn't launch into a screaming match. There were no viral Facebook rants. No public meltdowns or family interventions. I took my revenge the same way they'd taken their favoritism, systematically, quietly, and with a long memory. It started with the birthday party. Max was turning 8 in early June. He wanted a superhero-themed bash at the lake house. Balloons, costumes, a piñata shaped like a villain. I told him he could invite whoever he wanted. He wrote the guest list himself, in crooked little letters: school friends, neighbors, a few cousins, including Scott's kids. I thought long and hard about that one. Inviting them would mean opening a door. A risk. But then I realized, the real target wasn't the kids. It was the reaction. So I let Sophie deliver the invitation to Scott's house herself, accompanied by Angela, of course. According to her, Scott looked stunned. He asked twice if it was really okay, then mumbled something about checking his schedule. The next day, I got a text from him. "Appreciate the invite. Things have been tense. Might be good for the kids." I replied with a thumbs-up emoji and nothing else. 2 weeks later, the lake house was full of laughter, decorations, and barbecue smoke. Max ran around in a tiny cape while his friends took turns whacking the piñata. Sophie helped pour lemonade. Angela brought a cake that looked professionally made. And Scott showed up alone. He tried to play it cool, greeted the kids, shook hands with other parents, made a big show of being super dad. But I noticed the way he lingered near Angela. The way he scanned the crowd like someone trying to find the threat before it found him. He didn't know what I knew. Didn't know I'd been working with a family law attorney for 3 months. Didn't know Angela had quietly filed for a separation, listing emotional abuse and gaslighting as grounds. Didn't know I had receipts, literal ones, from the burner Venmo accounts he used to cover his little weekend getaways with someone named C. Didn't know Angela had copies of everything, including the time he drained half their joint account to buy crypto, then blamed it on market conditions. I didn't share any of that day. I didn't have to, because watching him try to hold court at my property, surrounded by my friends, with a wife who had stopped pretending and kids who ran to me before him, that was the beginning of his unraveling. But I still had one final move. And it came the following month at the reading of my grandparents' estate amendment. See, the original will had left the lake house to me years ago. That much was settled. But my grandfather, ever the planner, had also left behind a trust. One my parents controlled until a final clause activated, when the youngest of his great-grandchildren turned 8. That child was Max. And what the clause said was simple. Upon the 8th birthday of my final great-grandchild, the trust shall be distributed to all children of my sons in equal parts, provided they meet the moral conditions outlined. Those moral conditions. My grandfather had been a stickler for them. No criminal convictions. No active litigation. No moral turpitude, including marital misconduct. Angela's attorney submitted the evidence. Quietly. Legally. Scott's slice of the trust, $320,000, was frozen pending investigation. And when my parents found out, they lost it. My mother called me 5 times in one day. My father emailed. Even Scott finally broke radio silence. "What the hell did you do?" I replied with a single sentence. "Nothing you didn't do to yourself." A week later, I hosted a second cookout. Smaller. Just family friends and Angela's parents. And when my mom texted, asking if she could swing by to talk, I told her plainly, "You told me to drop off a plate. Now you're not on the guest list." That silence. That was the sound of a hierarchy crumbling. The fallout came slowly, like ash settling after a fire. Scott and Angela's separation became public. She filed for sole custody, cited emotional neglect and instability. She had backing, evidence, testimony. From me. From her parents. From their children's teachers. From his own messages. Scott didn't fight hard. Not because he didn't want to win, but because, for once, he had nothing to leverage. No golden sun glow. No spin to feed my parents that would make him look blameless. And my parents? They didn't reach out again. Not after the trust debacle. Not after the custody case. Not after seeing their entire family dynamic flipped like a bad card trick. For years, they made me feel small. Disposable. But the thing about dismissing someone who keeps their head down, who keeps receipts, who listens carefully and acts with precision. Eventually, they stop needing your approval and start building something you can't tear down. The lake house became ours, not just in deed, but in spirit. The kids painted rocks for the garden. Sophie hung fairy lights along the porch. Max named every frog by the dock. Angela came by more often, never needing an excuse. Sometimes she'd stay late. Sometimes she'd stay the night. Not as part of a scheme, not as some prize I won, but as someone who knew what it meant to survive a story people kept trying to rewrite. We didn't have to explain that to each other. We just got it. One night, after the kids were asleep, she stood beside me on the dock, staring out over the water. "You really pulled it off," she said. "I didn't pull anything off," I said. "I just stopped trying to make broken people act whole." She turned to me, smiled, and said, "Still, I think your grandfather would be proud." I nodded. "I think so too." We stood there in silence, letting the breeze carry the last of the smoke from the fire pit. And for the first time in a long time, I felt done. Not empty. Complete. Because revenge isn't always about destruction. Sometimes it's just about freedom. And I was finally free.